Chapter 1. A City of Ghosts. The moment Claire stepped out of the taxi onto the cobblestone streets of Montmartre, a familiar chill wrapped around her. Not from the crisp autumn air, but from the memories she had spent the last 5 years trying to bury. Paris, the city of love, felt more like a graveyard of ghosts she wasn't ready to face. She adjusted the strap of her leather travel bag and exhaled. It's just another assignment, Claire. That's what she told herself as she checked the address scribbled in her notebook. The cafe was tucked between a bookstore and an antique shop, its terrace dotted with wrought-iron tables and golden-hued lanterns. Inside, the scent of fresh espresso mingled with the delicate sweetness of pastries. She should have felt at home here. Paris had once been her playground, after all. But all she felt was uneasy. Claire took a seat by the window and set up her laptop, hoping work would provide some distraction. She was here for one reason: to write an article on the hidden artists of Paris, an assignment from her editor who thought her stories had grown too polished, too distant. She needed this. A deep dive into the heart of the city, a chance to fall back in love with storytelling. But Paris had other plans. The bell above the cafe door chimed, and for a moment, Claire didn't look up. Not until the air shifted, charged with something unmistakable. A presence she knew too well. Her fingers froze over her keyboard. Slowly, as if drawn by an invisible force, she lifted her gaze. And there he was, Julien Laurent, the boy who once painted her in hues of gold and crimson, the man whose heart she had broken with a one-way ticket to New York. He hadn't changed. If anything, time had sharpened him. The once boyish stubble now framed a chiseled jawline. His dark, unruly hair was still a little too long, falling over storm-grey eyes that had once held 1,000 unspoken promises. He hadn't seen her yet, but when he did, his step faltered. For a heartbeat, neither of them moved. Then a slow, almost amused smirk tugged at his lips. Claire Dupont. His voice was lower, rougher than she remembered. Of all the cafes in Paris, her throat went dry. Paris wasn't a graveyard, it was a trap. And she had just walked straight into it, a collision of past and present. Claire's fingers curled around the warm porcelain of her coffee cup, her knuckles white as she willed herself to breathe. Don't panic. Don't react. He's just a man you used to know, but Julien Laurent was never just a man. He took a step forward, slow, measured, like he was testing the weight of the moment. His smirk hadn't faded, but there was something unreadable in his eyes. Curiosity? Bitterness? Something else entirely? She forced a polite smile, the kind she had perfected over the years in press rooms and interviews. "Julien," she said, her voice betraying none of the chaos in her chest. "It's been a long time." 5 years. He slid into the chair across from her without waiting for an invitation, draping his arm over the backrest as if they were just two old friends casually catching up. As if she hadn't left him standing on a Parisian sidewalk with nothing but a silent goodbye. The cafe buzzed around them. Soft laughter, the clinking of silverware, the hum of Parisian life. But in this moment, there was only them. Claire took a slow sip of her coffee, mostly to buy herself a few seconds. "You look... well..." Julian's smirk deepened, though there was no humor behind it. "I'd say the same, but you always did have a talent for disappearing, so I can't be sure." There it is, the edge beneath his words, the unspoken accusation she had been bracing for. She exhaled softly and met his gaze. "Julien..." "Don't," he cut in, his voice smooth, dangerously calm. "I'm sure you have your reasons, and I'm sure they were very practical." That word stung more than it should have. Practical, like she had weighed his love on a scale and found it lacking. She straightened her spine, reminding herself she was no longer the girl who had left Paris heartbroken and unsure. She was Claire Dupont, award-winning travel journalist, a woman with purpose, with a life she had built all on her own. "I'm here for work," she said, as if that explained everything. "Of course you are." His fingers drummed idly on the table. Her writing another piece on hidden gems of the world or something equally impersonal. She bit back a sigh. "Actually, I'm covering local artists." She lifted her chin. "Your name came up." Julien leaned forward, his storm-grey eyes never leaving hers. Did it? There was something about the way he said it, slow, deliberate, that made her stomach tighten. She suddenly wondered if this was some kind of cosmic joke. If fate had been sitting in the shadows, waiting for the perfect moment to throw them back into each other's orbit. Julien, the boy who once believed in grand love stories. Claire, the girl who had stopped believing in them. Damn Paris. A barista appeared beside them, placing a fresh espresso in front of Julien. He thanked her with a nod before turning back to Claire. Well then, since you're covering local artists, I suppose you'll need an interview. She hesitated. I don't want to intrude if... But you are, he interjected smoothly. Then, after a beat, come to my gallery tonight. Claire blinked. Your gallery? Julien leaned back, watching her carefully. Yes, you do still write about things you actually experience, don't you? He was testing her and they both knew it. For a second she considered refusing. Maybe she should. Maybe seeing him again was a mistake. But then she remembered her editor's words. Your writing is too distant. Find something that matters. And Julien Laurent had always mattered. She met his gaze head-on. Fine. I'll be... There, Julien gave her one last unreadable look before standing. 8 o'clock, don't be late. Then, just like that, he was gone, disappearing into the Parisian streets. Claire exhaled, only just realizing how hard her heart was pounding. She pressed a hand to her chest, willing it to calm. This was just an interview, just a story. So why? Did it feel like the past was about to unravel her all over again? Have you ever returned to a place filled with old memories? How did it make you feel? If you believe in second chances and love stories that make your heart race, subscribe now and join us for more unforgettable romance. Chapter 2. A canvas of what was left unsaid. The gallery was tucked away in a quiet Parisian alley, its facade unassuming. Just an iron-wrought sign with Julien Laurent, peintre, scrawled in delicate gold letters. But the moment Claire stepped, inside the air shifted. Soft ambient jazz hummed through the space, mingling with the scent of oil paint and aged wood. Warm gallery lights cascaded over the walls, illuminating a collection of bold, aching strokes, splashes of color that bled. With emotion, her breath caught. Julien's art had always been striking, but this was something else. People milled about, critics, buyers, admirers sipping champagne as they murmured in French, but Claire barely noticed them. Her gaze locked onto one particular painting at the center of the room. It was of a woman. She knew it instantly, even if the colors weren't exact, even if her face was slightly turned away. The outline of her jaw, the curve of her shoulders, the way the light hit her hair, it was unmistakable. A lifetime's worth of memories surged up in her chest, threatening to suffocate her. Didn't expect to see yourself on the walls? She turned sharply. Julien stood behind her, dressed in all black, the sleeves of his shirt rolled up just enough to reveal the familiar inked lines on his forearms, sketches of stories he had never told. Claire swallowed, forcing herself to meet his eyes. I didn't expect to be in your art at all. Julien exhaled through his nose as if amused. You were always in it, even when I tried to paint anything else. The words landed heavy between them, thick with something unspoken, something unfinished. She forced a breath. It's beautiful, she admitted, her voice quieter now. Julien tilted his head, watching her the way he used to when he was sketching, like he was trying to read the truth beneath her words. Beauty, he murmured, is a strange thing. Sometimes it stays, sometimes it disappears. Her stomach twisted. This wasn't just about the painting. Before she could respond, an older man approached, his presence breaking the moment. Julien, your work, c'est magnifique. The man clasped Julien's shoulder, clearly an art dealer or critic. Julien offered a tight smile, but his gaze flickered back to Claire. Merci, Henri. Claire took the interruption as her chance to escape, moving toward another set of paintings. But no matter where she turned, she felt Julien's presence, a magnetic pull that had never really faded. She told herself this was just a work trip, just an article. But standing in the center of his world, surrounded by pieces of her past, she realized she had walked into something much more dangerous, the possibility of falling for him all over again. If you had to face someone from your past unexpectedly, how would you handle it? Chapter 3. A collision of old wounds. Claire found refuge near a dimly lit corner of the gallery, gripping a flute of champagne she had no intention of drinking. The evening had unraveled faster than she expected. It wasn't just the painting, it was him. Julien. His presence felt like a pulse beneath her skin, something she couldn't ignore no matter how hard she tried. She needed air, distance, something to steady herself, but just as she turned toward the exit, his voice cut through the room. Running away already? Her spine stiffened. Slowly she faced him. Julien stood a few feet away, hands in his pockets, watching her with that same unreadable gaze. "I'm not running," she said, voice even. He took a step closer, challenging. "No? That's funny because that's all you've ever done." The accusation landed sharp, cutting through the fragile space between them. The hum of conversation around them blurred into background noise. Claire let out a slow breath, gripping the stem of her glass so hard she thought it might crack. "You don't know anything about the choices I had to make." Julien let out a low laugh, one without humor. "I know you left. I know I woke up one morning and you were just gone." Claire flinched, old guilt clawing its way up her chest. "Was offered the biggest opportunity of my career, Julien," she said, voice tight. "You could have come with me." "Could I?" His eyes darkened. "And do what, Claire? Watch from the sidelines while you chased your dreams? Pretend Paris wasn't in my blood. That art wasn't my life." He scoffed. "No, you made a decision for both of us and you never looked back." She hated how much his words stung, hated that part of her knew he wasn't wrong, but he hadn't fought for her either. Claire took a step forward now, refusing to let him have the final say. "I waited, Julien. I waited for you to tell me not to go, to give me a reason to stay." His jaw tightened. "And if I had, would you have stayed? Would you have given up New York for me?" Silence, because the truth was she didn't know. They stared at each other, the weight of their past hanging between them like something fragile, something dangerous. Julien exhaled sharply, shaking his head. "You know what? It doesn't matter, doesn't it?" She shot back before she could stop herself. He stepped even closer, so close she could smell the faint scent of turpentine and cedarwood, the scent of a man who spent hours lost in his art. His voice was quieter now, rough around the edges. "Can't matter, Claire." Something in her chest tightened. Julien let out a breath, dragging a hand through his hair before turning away. "Enjoy Paris." And just like that, he walked away. Claire stood there, heart pounding, as she realized something terrifying. She had spent years convincing herself she had moved on. But now, standing in the middle of his world, watching him walk away for the second time, she wasn't so sure anymore. Have you ever been stuck in a situation where you had no choice but to confront your past? Love, passion, heartbreak, redemption. If these stories speak to you, hit that subscribe button and never miss a chapter. Chapter 4. A Storm. We can't escape. Claire should have walked away, should have let him disappear into the sea of art collectors and admirers, should have told herself that this, whatever this was, had already ended years ago. But then came the downpour. The sudden roar of rain against the gallery's glass windows made heads turn, conversation shifting into murmurs of surprise. Outside, the once clear Parisian night had unraveled into a storm. Sheets of rain slamming against the cobblestone streets, lightning splitting the sky in jagged streaks. Claire cursed under her breath. Of course Paris wouldn't let her leave cleanly. She hurried toward the entrance, pushing past patrons who huddled by the door, reluctant to step out into the deluge. Just as she reached for the handle, a familiar voice cut through the crowd. "You're not going anywhere." In this, Claire's entire body stilled. She turned, already knowing who she would see. Julien leaned against a nearby pillar, arms crossed, his shirt sleeves still rolled up from earlier. He looked as unaffected as ever, but there was something in his eyes, something that told her he wasn't quite ready to let her disappear again. "It's just rain," she muttered, shifting uncomfortably. "I'll manage." Julien arched a brow. "With what exactly? You have no umbrella, no coat, and zero sense of self-preservation. Claire clenched her jaw. I can take care of myself. Julien let out a short, humorless laugh. Right, just like you did when you left Paris without saying goodbye? And there it was again, the knife between them twisting. The people around them seemed to fade, the gallery's golden lighting suddenly feeling suffocating. You really can't let it go, can you? Claire snapped, her patience unraveling. I left because I had to, because my career— Your career, Julien interrupted, stepping closer. That's always been the reason, hasn't it? Claire's pulse pounded. And what, you think I should have stayed, given everything up for love? His jaw clenched, but he didn't answer. That was the problem, wasn't it? He had never asked her to stay, never fought for her, and yet here they were, still drowning in the wreckage of what they used to be. A sharp gust of wind pushed through the door as someone stepped outside, sending a spray of cold rain against Claire's skin. She shivered involuntarily. Julien sighed, rubbing a hand over his face. Some of the fire in his expression dimmed. Come with me, he said finally, quieter this time. Claire blinked. What? My place isn't far, he muttered. Unless you'd rather stay here all night waiting for the storm to end. She hesitated. Being alone with Julien again, after that conversation, after that tension, was dangerous. But staying in the gallery, pretending she wasn't still shaking from their argument, was even worse. Julien exhaled, already pulling out his keys. I'll take the silence as a yes. He pushed open the door and stepped into the storm without waiting for her. Claire lingered for exactly 2 seconds before she muttered a curse under her breath and followed him. How would you react if you found out someone from your past had never truly let go of you? Chapter 5. Dripping wet and too close for comfort. By the time they reached Julien's apartment, both of them were soaked through. Claire shivered as they stepped inside, water dripping from her hair onto the hardwood floors. Julien tossed his keys on the counter and shrugged off his damp shirt, leaving him in just a plain black t-shirt that clung to his 2 broad shoulders. Claire looked away too quickly. I'll get you a towel, he said, disappearing down the hall. She exhaled, running a hand through her wet hair. What the hell was she doing here? A minute later, Julien returned, handing her a towel and, of all things, one of his old shirts. She hesitated, fingers brushing over the fabric. Unless you'd rather stay in wet clothes, he said, arching a brow. She scowled but took it, because she was freezing, not because it smelled like him. Julien watched her for a beat longer, then nodded toward the bathroom. There's a heater in there, go. Claire muttered something under her breath but obeyed. When she closed the door behind her, she let out a long, slow breath, gripping the edges of the sink. This was a mistake. Being here, being around him, letting him get under her skin again. But as she peeled off her wet blouse and pulled his shirt over her head, she knew something with horrifying certainty. The worst mistake wasn't coming here. It was thinking she had ever stopped loving him. Do you believe unresolved emotions can ever truly fade, or do they always linger beneath the surface? Chapter 6. Fire and Ice. By the time Claire stepped out of the bathroom, Julien had already changed into dry clothes, a dark sweater hanging loosely over his frame. He stood in the kitchen, pouring 2 glasses of wine like it was just another night, like they weren't standing knee-deep in the wreckage of their past. The moment he looked up and saw her, his shirt hanging off her frame, her hair damp from the rain, his fingers hesitated around the glass. Something flickered in his gaze, something that made her pulse betray her, but then, just as quickly, the look was gone. Replaced with something unreadable. Didn't think you'd actually wear it, Claire scoffed, dropping onto the couch. It was this or hypothermia. She pulled the towel over her lap. Trust me, if I had better options, I'd have taken them. Julien smirked, amusement playing at the corner of his mouth. Always a pleasure, Claire, she rolled her eyes. You know, if you hate me so much, you could have let me drown in the rain. Julien picked up his glass, leaning against the counter. I don't hate you, she snorted. Really, because you have a funny way of showing it. His expression darkened just slightly, something sharp flickering beneath the surface. What do you expect, Claire? That we'd have a sweet little reunion, talk about old times, laugh over how it all fell apart? She clenched her jaw. I didn't expect anything. That's exactly the problem. The words hit harder than she wanted them to. Julien exhaled, shaking his head. He grabbed his own glass of wine and crossed the room, dropping onto the couch beside her. Not too close, not too far. Claire shifted, feeling the heat of him despite the space between them. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then, softly, Julien said, "Why did you really leave?" Claire's fingers tightened around the stem of her glass. "We've already had this fight." "Correction, we had a half fight in a cafe. You left before we could finish it, just like you always do." Her head snapped toward him. "That's not fair." Julien's gaze was steady, unrelenting. "Isn't it?" Claire set down her wine glass with more force than necessary, then turned fully toward him, her frustration boiling over. "You want the truth?" she snapped. "Fine. I left because I was scared, okay? Scared that if I stayed, I'd lose myself in you. That one day, I'd wake up and wonder if I'd given up everything I worked for just to be Julien Laurent's girlfriend." Julien's jaw tightened, but he didn't look away. "I loved you," she whispered, voice raw, "but I needed to know who I was without you." A muscle ticked in his jaw, but he remained silent. The weight of her own words settled heavy in her chest. Maybe she should have lied. Maybe it would have been easier. But for the first time since she had walked back into his life, Julien didn't look angry. He just looked tired. "You really think that's all you would have been?" he murmured. Claire's breath caught. Julien shook his head, his voice quieter now. "You talk like I wanted to keep you small, like I wanted you to disappear into my life and not have one of your own." Claire swallowed hard. "I never wanted that, Claire. I just wanted you." For a moment, the storm outside was nothing compared to the storm between them. Then, too quickly, Julien stood, taking his glass with him. "It's late. You should get some sleep." Claire sat frozen on the couch as he disappeared down the hall, leaving her alone with nothing but her racing pulse and the awful realization clawing at her chest. She had spent years convincing herself she had made the right choice. So why did it feel like she had been wrong all along? How would you handle seeing your ex with someone new, especially when old feelings resurface? Every love story deserves a second chance, just like Julien and Claire. Subscribe now and be part of the journey. Chapter 7. Too close, too familiar. Claire tried to sleep. Really, she did. But the second she closed her eyes, she could still hear his voice, feel the weight of his words pressing against her skin. "I never wanted that, Claire. I just wanted you." She shifted under the blanket on Julien's couch, staring at the ceiling as the storm outside raged on. The rain pounded against the windows, the occasional flash of lightning illuminating the room. She groaned, rubbing her hands over her face. This was ridiculous. She had spent years building a life away from him, years convincing herself that leaving was the right choice. So why did being here, in his space, wearing his damn shirt, smelling his scent everywhere, feel like her body was betraying her? Claire tossed off the blanket and stood, heading for the kitchen. Maybe some water would clear her mind, but she wasn't alone. She barely made it past the counter before nearly colliding into Julien's back. He turned at the same moment, and suddenly they were chest to chest, barely an inch between them. Claire inhaled sharply. Julien blinked, clearly caught off guard, his storm-grey eyes flicking to hers. His sweater was slightly wrinkled, his hair tousled. He had been sleeping too, or at least trying to. For a moment, neither of them moved. Neither of them spoke. Then, Julien exhaled a quiet laugh, but there was nothing amusing about it. "Can't sleep either," he murmured. Claire swallowed, her throat suddenly dry. "No." His gaze dropped, just for a second, to where her hand still rested against his chest. She hadn't even realized she had reached out to steady herself. Neither of them moved away. Claire could feel the heat of him, the way his chest rose and fell beneath her fingertips. She could smell the faintest traces of paint and cedarwood lingering on his sweater. It was too much, too familiar. She should move, say something, anything. But Julien beat her to it. His voice was softer now, lower. "Do you still run when things get too close, Claire?" The question sent a slow electric burn down her spine. She forced herself to lift her chin, matching his stare. "No." "Really?" His voice was quiet, but the challenge was clear. Her fingers curled slightly against his sweater. This was dangerous. Too much. Too close. But Julien didn't step back either. For a brief, reckless second, Claire thought he might kiss her. She thought she might let him, but then, as if sensing the tension snapping too tight, Julien let out a slow exhale and stepped back just an inch. Just enough. Go back to sleep, Claire, he murmured. She should have felt relieved. But as she watched him turn away, leaving her standing alone in the dim glow of the kitchen, she realized she didn't want distance. She wanted him. And that terrified her more than anything else. Have you ever walked away from something or someone you cared about because you believed it was for the best? Chapter 8. No more hiding. Claire had barely made it back to the couch when everything went dark. The hum of the heater died. The soft glow of the Paris skyline disappeared behind the blackout curtains, and the rain outside suddenly felt louder, heavier, as if the storm had crept inside with them. A power outage. Perfect, just perfect. She let out a frustrated breath, pushing up on her elbows. Then came the footsteps. Great. Julien's voice muttered from somewhere near the hallway. Just what we needed. Claire swung her legs over the couch, blinking into the darkness. Tell me you have candles. A soft rustling, then the flick of a lighter. A faint glow flickered in the space between them, illuminating Julien's face in sharp golden edges. The flame danced in his hand as he lit a candle on the coffee table. Claire swallowed, suddenly aware of how quiet everything was. No city noise. No distraction, just the two of them, trapped in the kind of intimacy she wasn't ready for. Julien set the candle down and exhaled. It's just a power cut. I'll check the fuse box. He turned, but just as he did, the world tilted beneath him, or maybe it was just him collapsing. Claire lunged forward on instinct, catching his arm before he could fully crumple. Julien! His body was too heavy, too limp for a man who usually moved with effortless control. Hey, sit down, she ordered, guiding him toward the couch. He barely resisted, his breath coming too fast, too uneven. Claire's pulse spiked with concern. This wasn't just exhaustion. Julien muttered something, in French, rubbing a hand over his face as he slumped back against the cushions. What's wrong? She demanded, kneeling beside him. He let out a slow breath, his eyes fluttering shut for a brief moment. Too brief. Julien. She grabbed his wrist, pressing her fingers against his pulse. It was racing. His jaw tightened, but he didn't pull. Away. It's fine. Claire let out a sharp laugh. Yeah, because nearly hitting the floor definitely screams fine. Julien exhaled through his nose, clearly irritated. Good. Irritated meant conscious. Low blood sugar, he finally muttered. I forgot to eat today. Claire's stomach twisted. Forgot to eat? She stared at him, really seeing him for the first time tonight, the sharp angles of his face, the faint hollowness beneath his cheekbones. The way he was leaning into the couch like sitting up was too much effort. Guilt curled in her stomach. Had she been so wrapped up in their history that she hadn't noticed how drained he looked? Without another word, she pushed herself up and marched into his kitchen. Julien groaned. Claire, shut up. She flung open the fridge, searching for something with actual nutrients. Half a bottle of wine, cheese, and nothing. She swore under her breath. You really don't keep food in here. I've been busy. Claire gritted her teeth, stubborn as ever. She grabbed the only thing that made sense, a chocolate bar from a half-open cabinet and a bottle of orange juice from the counter. Marching back to him, she shoved the chocolate into his hand. Eat. Julien blinked at her. You're really going to— Yes, she snapped. Now eat, or I swear to God I will force-feed you. A beat of silence. Then, unexpectedly, Julien smirked. Force-feed me. His voice dipped lower, teasing. Now that's a visual. Heat crawled up Claire's neck. Shut up and chew, Laurent. Still smirking, he took a bite. She watched him carefully, arms crossed, waiting for his color to return. For a while, neither of them spoke. The candle flickered, casting shadows that danced across his face, across his hands, across the space between them that was still too fragile. Then, finally, thank you, he murmured. Claire exhaled, rolling her eyes. Not that hard, was it? Julien chuckled softly, but then his gaze lifted, and something shifted, something raw, quiet, dangerous. Her heart skipped. "You always did take care of me," he said, his voice almost reverent. Claire froze, because for the first time since she had walked back into his life, Julien wasn't looking at her like a ghost from his past. He was looking at her like he had just realized she was still his future, and she didn't know how to handle that. Do you believe in grand romantic gestures, or are words enough? What would you do in Claire's shoes? Let us know in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more captivating stories. Chapter 9. The Truth. We never said. The candle flickered between them, its soft glow casting shadows across the room, across Julien's face, across the sharp lines of his expression that had softened just slightly. Claire stayed quiet, watching. As he finished the chocolate, his color slowly returning, the sharp tension in his posture easing. She should have felt relieved, but instead, she felt unsettled. Because for the first time since she had walked back into his life, Julien wasn't trying to fight her, and maybe that was worse. She shifted, glancing away. "You really need to take better care of yourself." Julien let out a soft chuckle, but it lacked his usual sharpness. "You always did worry too much," Claire huffed. "You nearly passed out, Julien. Forgive me if that concerns me a little." He exhaled, rubbing a hand over his jaw. "It's just been a long few months," she frowned. "The gallery." Julien hesitated, his gaze flicking toward the candlelight as if he were weighing his words. The gallery, the commissions, everything. His voice was quieter now. "I thought it would feel different. Like, if I finally got here, it would mean something." Claire's chest tightened. "And does it?" He let out a slow breath. "I don't know." Something cracked inside her at that confession, because Julien had always been the boy with a fire inside him, the one who spoke of art like it was a living thing, the one who could paint emotion with nothing but a brushstroke, and yet here he was sitting in the dark, admitting that it wasn't enough. Claire shifted forward, resting her arms on her knees. "Julien." He looked at her then, really looked at her, his grey eyes searching hers, like he was waiting for her to say something he didn't know how to ask for. Her throat tightened. "You once told me," she murmured, "that your art was never about a success, that it wasn't about fame or money or recognition. It was about making people feel something." A ghost of a smile flickered across his lips. "That sounds like something I'd say." Claire swallowed. "So, do you still feel it?" Julien was quiet for a long time. Then softly, too softly, he said, "Not like I used to." The admission settled heavy between them. Claire felt something inside her chest ache, because she knew that feeling too well, that empty, restless hunger for something more. She exhaled, staring down at her hands. "I know what that's like." Julien studied her, his head tilting just slightly. "Do you?" She nodded, tracing the rim of her glass with her fingertip. "I got everything I wanted." Julien, the career, the freedom, the ability to go anywhere, write about anything. But sometimes, she hesitated, voice quieter now, "sometimes I wonder if I lost something along the way." Julien's gaze didn't waver. "And what did you lose?" Claire swallowed hard. Him. She should say it. She should tell him. But instead she forced a tight smile. "I don't know." Julien's lips pressed together, as if he knew exactly what she wasn't saying. The candle flickered, throwing golden light across his features. His voice was softer now, lower. "I missed you, you know." Claire's breath caught. He said it like it wasn't a confession, like it was a fact. Her heart hammered against her ribs, and she almost let herself reach for his hand. But then Julien exhaled and leaned back against the couch, running a hand through his hair. "Anyway, you should get some sleep." And, just like that, the moment slipped away. Claire hesitated, something heavy settling in her chest, but she nodded, pushing herself up. "Yeah," she murmured. "Good night, Julien." He didn't answer, and as she walked back to the couch and curled beneath the blanket, she couldn't help but wonder, what would have happened if she had stayed that night all those years ago, and more terrifyingly, What would happen if she stayed this time? Can a single kiss change everything between two people, or does it take more than that? Chapter 10. The Walls. We billed Claire woke to the scent of coffee and rain. For a moment she forgot where she was. The soft hum of morning Paris, the golden light slipping through the curtains, it felt like another lifetime. A memory she had stepped into by accident. But then she sat up, Julian's shirt slipping off one shoulder, and the truth hit her. This wasn't a dream. This was real. She was in his apartment, in his world again. And for the first time since last night, the reality of that unsettled her because she had let herself get too close. Claire pushed off the blanket and ran a hand through her hair, trying to shake off the weight of last night's conversation. The words that had stayed with her long after Julian had gone silent. "I missed you, you know." She swallowed hard. No. She couldn't do this. She couldn't let herself slip back into him like no time had passed, like her heart hadn't shattered. The first time, Claire took a deep breath and stood, heading for the kitchen, and that's when she heard it, a voice. A woman's voice. She stopped cold. Then she heard it again, soft, murmured in French, followed by Julian's low, steady response. Claire's stomach twisted. Her body moved before she could think, following the voices down the hall. When she reached the doorway, she froze. Julian stood in the kitchen, pouring coffee. Across from him, a woman leaned against the counter. She was stunning. Effortlessly elegant, with messy dark curls, bright hazel eyes, and a knowing smirk that made Claire's skin crawl. She was also wearing Julian's hoodie. Claire's pulse hammered. Julian looked up then, his expression shifting the second he saw her. His mouth opened, maybe to explain, maybe to diffuse, but the woman spoke first. "Well," she said in perfect English, eyes flicking between them with interest. "You must be Claire." Claire's blood went cold. Who the hell was this woman? Have you ever had to let go of someone you cared about because they were in love with someone else? If you made it this far, you're officially invested. Hit subscribe and join our growing community of romance lovers. Chapter 11. The Ghost. Between us. For a long second, Claire didn't move. Julian had gone completely still, coffee cup frozen in his grip, like he wasn't sure what to say. But Claire's mind was already spinning, because whoever this woman was, she knew who Claire was. She forced herself to straighten. "And you are?" The woman's smirk deepened as she crossed her arms over her chest. "Lena." She said it like Claire should already know. She didn't, but that didn't stop the sudden sinking feeling in her stomach. "She's an old friend," Julian cut in, his voice measured, careful. Claire's gaze flicked back to him. His jaw was tense, his posture almost defensive. Something in her chest tightened. An old friend, right. That explained why she was here at 7 in the morning wearing his hoodie. Claire swallowed, her throat tight. "Right," she said evenly. "Well, don't let me interrupt." She turned to leave, but Julian moved fast. "Claire, wait." She didn't. She kept walking, past the living room, past the reminders of everything that was pulling her back, to him. But then his fingers caught her wrist. It was soft, gentle, but enough to make her stop. Enough to make the air between them snap tight. "Don't do that," he murmured. She clenched her jaw. "Do what?" "Walk away." Claire exhaled, willing herself not to react. "I'm not walking away, Julian. I'm just not doing this." His grip loosened, but he didn't let go. His voice was quieter now, almost pleading. "Lena's nothing," he said. "She just—" He exhaled, running a hand through his hair. "She just showed up. I didn't invite her here." Claire wanted to believe him. God, she wanted to. But this wasn't 5 years ago. She wasn't the same girl who had once let herself believe that love was enough. She lifted her chin. "You don't owe me an explanation, Julian." His jaw tightened. "Maybe not." His fingers finally released her wrist, but his gaze didn't let her go. "But that doesn't mean I don't want to give you one." Her chest tightened. She should leave. She should grab her things and put as much distance between them as possible. But she didn't, because Julian still had a hold on her, and no matter how much she tried to fight it, she knew he always would. Have you ever convinced yourself something was just casual, only to realize it meant more? Tell us, do you believe in rekindled love? Drop a comment and don't forget to subscribe for more heartfelt stories. Chapter 12. The breaking point. Claire ripped her wrist free from Julian's grasp, her pulse pounding so loudly she could barely hear the rain outside anymore. Don't, she snapped, her voice sharper than she intended. Don't stand there and act like this is nothing. Julian's jaw clenched, his eyes darkening. Because it is nothing. Claire let out a bitter laugh, stepping back as she shook her head. Right. Just like that painting of me in your gallery was nothing. Just like the way you looked at me last night was nothing. You want to pretend this doesn't matter? Fine, but don't lie to me, Julian. Julian exhaled hard, raking a hand through his hair. Claire, no. She cut him off, her chest burning, her voice unsteady. 5 years, Julian. I spent 5 years telling myself I made the right choice. That leaving you, leaving us, was what I had to do. Her voice cracked, but she didn't stop. And then I come back to Paris and you're here and it's like no time has passed except... She broke off, swallowing hard, forcing herself to meet his gaze. Except maybe it has, she finished. Quieter now. Because I don't know you anymore. The words landed heavy between them. For a moment, Julian said nothing. He just stared at her, his grey eyes stormy, unreadable. Then suddenly, you don't know me. His voice was quiet, but there was fire beneath it. You're the one who left, Claire. You're the one who chose to walk away. So don't stand there and act like you're the only one who's been struggling with this. Claire's breath hitched, but Julian wasn't finished. You think I haven't thought about you? His voice was low, rough, dangerous. That I haven't spent the last 5 years wondering why you left without even fighting for us. Do you know how many times I picked up the phone, ready to call you, only to stop because I knew it wouldn't? Change a damn thing? Claire's stomach twisted, but she refused to look away. I wanted you to stop me, she whispered. I wanted you to tell me to stay. Julian let out a harsh breath, stepping closer. And if I had, would you have? Or would you have spent the rest of your life resenting me for it? She didn't answer, because she didn't know. Because maybe he was right. The silence stretched, thick with too many years of unsaid things. Then Julian shook his head, his voice quieter now, rawer. You always said you wanted freedom, he murmured. But did you ever stop to think that maybe I did too? Claire's chest tightened. Because no, she hadn't. She had been so afraid of losing herself in him that she had never once stopped to think that maybe he had felt the same way. Julian exhaled, running a hand down his face before turning away. This is pointless, he muttered. Claire steeled herself. So that's it? You want me to walk away again? Julian's shoulders tensed, but he didn't turn, and maybe that was her answer. Claire swallowed hard, blinking against the burning in her eyes. Then, without another word, she turned and walked. Out the door. This time he didn't stop her, and this time it hurt more than the first. Do you believe love can be rekindled, or is the past best left behind? Some stories never truly end. They just wait for a second chance. Subscribe now so you don't miss what happens next. Chapter 13. Drenched in what we can't escape. Claire barely made it down the narrow Parisian street before the sky opened up above her. The rain came fast and relentless, drenching her within seconds, soaking through Julian's oversized shirt still hanging off her frame. She didn't stop. She didn't dare. Her hands curled into fists as she walked faster, her footsteps splashing against the uneven cobblestones. She needed distance, needed space to breathe, but no matter how far she walked, she couldn't outrun the ache sitting, heavy in her chest. She had told herself that leaving was the right thing, so why did it feel like she had just made the biggest mistake of her life all over again? The streets were nearly empty now, Paris retreating into the warm glow of cafes and the safety of apartment windows. She could see the Seine in the distance, the water dark and restless beneath the storm. Keep walking. Don't turn back. The thought barely formed before a strong gust of wind knocked into her, nearly sending her stumbling. She let out a sharp breath, wiping at her soaked face. Damn it. She needed to get inside somewhere. Anywhere. She glanced around, searching for a cafe, somewhere to disappear for a while, and then she heard it. A voice low and unmistakable cutting through the rain. Claire. Her breath hitched. For a second she thought she had imagined it, thought it was some cruel trick of the city, Another memory sneaking in when she least expected it. But then, footsteps. Fast, determined. And suddenly, he was there. Julien stopped, a few feet away, his own clothes drenched, his hair a mess of wet strands sticking to his forehead. His chest rose and fell like he had been running, like he had chased her down without a second thought. Claire's throat tightened. "Claire," he said again, his voice rough, desperate. She shook her head, blinking against the rain. "What are you doing?" Julien exhaled hard, like he didn't even know the answer himself, like something had pulled him here just as violently as it had pulled her away. He ran a hand down his face, pushing back his wet hair. Then he stepped closer. Claire didn't move. The city spun around them, blurred with rain and streetlights, but none of it mattered, because all she could see was him. Julien clenched his jaw. "I don't want to fight anymore." Claire's heart slammed against her ribs. "Then what do you want?" He swallowed, hesitated. Then finally, "You." The word was so quiet, so raw, she almost missed it beneath the storm. Almost. Claire felt something in her chest crack open. Julien let out a breath, his gaze burning into hers. "I spent so long convincing myself that I had to let you go, that I had to be okay with it. But then you came back and it's like..." He exhaled sharply. "It's like I can't breathe when you're near. But I sure as hell can't breathe when you're gone either." Claire's lips parted, her pulse hammering. Julien took another step and suddenly there was nothing but rain and heat and 5 years of unsaid things between them. "I don't care if it's reckless," he murmured. "I don't care if we break apart again. I just know that if I let you walk away this time, I'll never forgive myself." Claire's chest ached. This was it. The moment. The one she had spent years imagining, fearing, aching for. She could leave again. Walk away like she always did, or she could finally let herself stay. Her breath shook. Then, before she could stop herself, she closed the distance. She crashed into him, grabbing his face, pulling him down, finally giving in to everything they had spent years running from. Julien broke against her, his hands gripping her waist, his mouth claiming hers with desperate, aching need. The rain poured around them, but neither of them noticed, because this was it. This was home, and Claire wasn't running anymore. Have you ever held back from something you wanted because you were afraid of getting hurt again? Chapter 14. The choice that changes everything. The moment Claire's lips met Julien's, the world tilted. The rain poured around them, soaking through their clothes, making every touch desperate, aching, real. Julien's hands gripped her, waist pulling her against him like he couldn't stand the distance anymore. And Claire, God, Claire had forgotten what it felt like to be kissed like this, like she was something worth losing breath over, like she was something that had never been let go of in the first place. Her hands tangled in his hair, fingertips digging into his soaked sweater as Julien deepened the kiss, his lips moving over hers like he was memorizing the shape of her all over again. It wasn't soft. It wasn't careful. It was 5 years of unsaid things, 5 years of aching for something neither of them had ever truly let go of. The moment snapped when Julien pulled away just slightly, foreheads touching, breath ragged. His thumb brushed over her cheek, wiping away a raindrop. Or maybe it wasn't a raindrop at all. His voice was low, hoarse. "Tell me this isn't a mistake." Claire's chest ached, because it wasn't. It never had been. But God, was she terrified. Her fingers tightened in his sweater, her breath shaky as hell. "I don't know how to do this again." Julien swallowed, his grip on her waist firm, steady. "Then let's figure it out together." The weight of his words settled deep inside her. There was no anger this time, no blame, just the truth. Between them, she could walk away again, let the fear win, or she could stay. And finally, after years of regret, Claire realized she wanted to stay. Have you ever realized that everything you were searching for was right in front of you? Paris holds many secrets, and so does this love story. Subscribe to uncover them all. Chapter 15. Learning to Love Again. 3 weeks later, Paris had never felt more alive. The air was crisp, tinged with the scent of roasted chestnuts from street vendors. The Seine shimmered beneath the golden afternoon light, and the distant hum of passing conversations wrapped around Claire like a song she had once known but forgotten the words to. And beside her, Julien walked like he had always belonged there, which of course he had. The past 3 weeks had been complicated. The night of the storm had changed everything. One kiss, one confession, one moment of raw honesty that neither of them could take back. But after the rain had stopped, after the adrenaline had faded, reality had settled in. They were trying, they were learning each other all over again. And God, was it terrifying? Because the stakes were so much higher now. They weren't kids anymore. They weren't two reckless dreamers who thought love could solve everything. They were two people who had broken apart and were now trying to put the pieces back together, without knowing if they would ever fit the same way again. Claire adjusted, her scarf watching as Julien took a slow sip of his espresso, his other hand lazily tucked into the pocket of his coat. "You're staring," he murmured, not looking up. Claire smirked. "You love it." He finally glanced at her, one brow arched, that damn smirk tugging at his lips. "Maybe." She rolled her eyes, but her chest felt lighter. This was what she had missed. The effortless teasing, the way he knew how to pull her out of her own head. For 3 weeks they had been testing the waters. Morning coffee dates, late-night gallery walks, dinners that felt like a return to something familiar, something safe, but with an edge of something new. But they hadn't talked about the bigger questions. Like what happens next, like if she's really staying, and worst of all, like what happens if they break again. Claire sighed, setting her cup down. "We're avoiding it." Julien quirked a brow. "Avoiding what?" She gave him a look. His smirk faltered, just slightly. He leaned back, drumming his fingers against his cup. "You mean the conversation where we talk about what happens when your article is finished?" Claire stiffened. She hated that he had said it first, because the truth was, she didn't have an answer. Her work assignment was almost complete. She had written 6 articles on Paris, each one pulling her further into the realization that this was where she belonged. She had spent years telling herself she had made the right choice by leaving. But now, sitting across from Julien, watching the way his fingers curled around his coffee cup, the way he watched her with the kind of quiet intensity that had always unraveled her, she knew she had been wrong. Julien exhaled, his voice softer now. "Are you staying, Claire?" She opened her mouth, then closed it, because God, she wanted to. But the fear was still there, sitting in her chest like a weight she didn't know how to get rid of. Julien studied her, and after a long pause, he nodded. Like he understood, like he always did. "Let's take a walk," he said, standing. "There's something I want to show you." Claire hesitated, then reached for her coat. Following him felt natural, just like it always had. Would you choose love or career if faced with an impossible choice? Chapter 16. Lena's truth. Claire didn't expect to see Lena again so soon. But as she and Julien strolled through the streets of Montmartre, his fingers brushing against hers every so often, a familiar voice called out, "Julien?" Claire turned just in time to see Lena stepping out of a nearby bookstore. She looked effortlessly chic as always, dark curls framing her face, a stylish trench coat cinched around her waist. But something was different. Her expression wasn't playful. It wasn't smug. It was resigned. Julien tensed beside Claire. Lena. Lena's gaze flickered between them before settling on Claire. Then, with a small, almost bittersweet smile, she nodded. "I knew it," she said simply. Claire frowned. "Knew what?" Lena exhaled, shaking her head. "That it was always you. That it was always going to be you." Claire's stomach twisted. Julien stiffened. "Lena." "No, it's okay," she interrupted, her tone light, but her eyes giving away something deeper. I guess I wanted to pretend for a little while that maybe, if things had been different, you would have looked at me like that." Claire's heart squeezed, because Lena had known all along. She had known, and yet she had still hoped. Julien sighed, running, a hand through his hair. I never meant— Lena laughed softly. I know, that's the worst part. You never meant to, but that doesn't mean it didn't hurt. Silence. Then Lena straightened, smoothing out an invisible crease in her coat. Anyway, I just wanted to say, I'm happy for you. Both of you. Claire hesitated. Lena smiled, but there was something final in it. We were never meant to be, Julien, but I hope you and Claire get it right this time. Then, without waiting for a response, she turned and walked away. Claire watched her disappear into the crowd, a strange mix of emotions swirling inside her. Julien let out a slow breath, rubbing his jaw. Well, Claire sighed, that was a lot. He huffed out a small laugh, shaking his head. Yeah. For a moment neither of them spoke. Then, finally, I am staying, Claire said suddenly, the words spilling out before she could— Stop them. Julien froze. Claire turned to face him fully, her chest hammering, her throat tight. I don't want to run anymore, she admitted. I don't want to keep wondering what my life could have been if I had stayed. She swallowed hard. I want this. Julien's expression shifted, something breaking open in his gaze. Then, before she could second-guess herself, he reached for her. His hands framed her face, and this time, when he kissed her, it wasn't desperate. It wasn't frantic. It was everything she had been missing, and for the first time in her life, Claire knew she was exactly where she was supposed to be. Have you ever had to make a decision that would change the course of your life? How did you decide? Chapter 17. A Life Built Together. Claire had never known Paris like this, not as a tourist, not as a passing visitor chasing a deadline, but as someone who belonged here. 3 months had passed since she had told Julien she was staying, and in that time, everything had changed. Or maybe she had simply stopped running long enough to see what had always been waiting for her. She woke up beside him now. She walked through the streets of Montmartre with purpose, knowing where she was going, not just in the city, but in her life. And for the first time in years, she wasn't waiting for the other shoe to drop. She was just living Julien's world becomes their world. The gallery was thriving. With Claire's connections in the journalism world, Julien's work had reached international buyers, his exhibits selling out faster than ever. You do realize you're famous now, right? Claire teased one evening as she walked into his studio, watching him work. Julien, hunched over a new painting, barely glanced up. Claire smirked, stepping closer. He was always like this when he worked, lost, consumed, half in this world, half in whatever place his mind took him when he painted. She stopped behind him, resting her chin on his shoulder. The painting was stunning. Deep, rich colors, a skyline at dusk. And in the center, a woman standing on a balcony, her hair whipped by the wind, her gaze lost in the distance. Claire's heart tightened. Because she knew it was her. Julien set his brush down, exhaling. You always get this look when you watch me paint, Claire huffed. And what look is that? Julien turned slightly, smirking. Like you just realized you're in love with me all over again. Claire rolled her eyes but couldn't fight the warmth in her chest. Shut up, Laurent. His laugh rumbled against her, and for the first time in years Claire felt steady, like this was home, like he was home. The business they didn't expect to build, it had started as a joke. People would pay to see the world like you do, Julien had teased one morning over coffee. Watching Claire scribble notes about her latest travel piece, she had rolled her eyes. They already do. It's called a magazine. No, he had insisted, leaning forward. Not just words, experiences. What if we built something, you and me? At first she had laughed, but then she had thought about it, and now they owned something together, a company, a business, a passion project that combined their talents, art, and travel, storytelling and visuals, photography and creativity. They called it Vie en couleur, life in color. Claire curated Parisian travel experiences for art lovers, while Julien hosted intimate gallery nights and painting sessions for tourists looking for a deeper experience of the city. It was the best of both of them. And it was thriving. Who would have thought? Claire mused one afternoon as she typed up an itinerary for an upcoming Paris Through an Artist's Eyes event. Julien, painting across the room, arched a brow. That you'd end up stuck with me? Yeah. Shocking. Claire threw a crumpled piece of paper at him. I meant the business, idiot. But Julien only grinned. Admit it. You love being stuck with me. Claire bit her lip. Because he was right. She did. The push toward forever one night. After a particularly successful gallery opening, Lena pulled Claire aside. You're different, Lena said, studying her. Claire blinked. I am? Lena nodded. You're not restless anymore. Claire hesitated, because... She was right. For years she had been running, always searching for something more, never letting herself just be. But here, with Julien, she wasn't searching anymore. Lena smirked. You should probably start preparing yourself, by the way. Claire frowned. For what? Lena arched a brow, nodding toward the other side of the room, where Julien was watching her. But not just watching, studying, admiring, like she was the most important thing in his world, like he was planning something. Claire's stomach flipped, because for the first time in her life, she wasn't afraid of forever. She was ready for it. And if she knew Julien, she wouldn't have to wait long. Do you think love should be fought for, or should it come naturally without obstacles? Love romance, love drama, hit subscribe, and let's dive into more heart-stopping stories together. Chapter 18. The Night. Everything changed. The night air was warm, carrying the scent of rain-kissed stone and jasmine as Claire and Julien walked along the Seine. The city was alive, golden lights reflecting off the water, laughter drifting. From nearby cafes, Julien's fingers brushed against hers, a silent invitation, and Claire didn't hesitate before lacing her fingers through his. It still astonished her how easy this felt now, how it had taken years of running, years of longing, years of regret, only for them to end up right back here in Paris where they were always meant to be. Where are we going? Claire murmured, as Julien led her down a quieter street, away from the bustling tourists. Julien smirked, his grip tightening around her hand. You'll see. A few minutes later, they reached a hidden courtyard, tucked away behind a small art gallery. Ivy curled around the stone archways, the dim glow of lanterns casting shadows that danced against the old walls. Claire gasped softly. Julien! He stepped behind her, his fingers skimming down her arms, his breath warm against her ear. I used to bring my sketchbook here, when I needed to think, when I needed to escape. Claire turned in his arms, tilting her chin up to meet his gaze. Are we escaping now? Julien exhaled slowly, his hands sliding to her waist, pulling, her flush against him. No, he murmured. We're finally staying. Claire's breath hitched, because there was something different in the way he was looking at her. Something hungry, something certain, something that made heat coil low in her stomach. Julien's fingers traced slow circles along the fabric of her dress, his eyes never leaving hers. You drive me insane, he murmured, his voice low and rough. Claire's lips parted, her pulse pounding. Do I? He hummed, leaning down until his nose brushed against hers. You always have. And then he kissed her. But this time it was different. This wasn't the rain-soaked desperation of their first kiss. This wasn't the careful tenderness of their second. This was heat. This was fire. This was Julien pressing her against the old stone wall, one hand sliding into her hair, the other gripping her waist like he needed her closer, like he'd never let her go again. Claire moaned softly, fisting the fabric of his shirt as she arched into him, her entire body flushed and burning. Julien's lips trailed down her jaw to the hollow of her throat, his breath ragged, his fingers skimming over the thin straps of her dress. Tell me to stop. Claire's head fell back, exposing more of herself to him. I won't. A deep groan rumbled in Julien's chest as he kissed his way lower, his hands sliding beneath the fabric of her dress, over the bare skin of her thighs. The feeling of him everywhere all at once was enough to send her spiraling. Julien, she whispered, pleading, aching, and God, the way he looked at her then, like she was the only thing that had ever mattered, like he was devouring her, worshipping her, like he was falling even harder, even deeper, even more irrevocably in love with her. Claire, he murmured against her lips, let's go home. Her entire body burned at the promise in his voice, and when he took her hand and led her back through the Parisian streets, neither of them looked back, because there was no more running, no more pretending, no more hesitation. Tonight, Julien would love her the way he had always wanted to, and tomorrow, he would make sure she was his forever. Have you ever had a moment where you just knew you were exactly where you were supposed to be? Chapter 19. The Proposal. A Love Story in Paris. The next morning, Julien woke with a decision already made. Claire was his. She had always been his, even in the years they had spent apart. And now that she was here, now that she had finally stopped running, he wasn't going to wait any longer. She stirred beside him, still wrapped in the warmth of last night, her bare shoulder peeking out from beneath the sheets. Julien watched her for a moment, memorizing every curve, every freckle, every soft inhale as she slept. He could wait for the perfect moment. Or he could make this moment perfect, because with Claire every second felt like forever, and he wanted that forever to start now. The Plan. A Love Letter to Paris by. The time Claire woke up, Julien had already disappeared from their apartment, leaving nothing behind but a note on the pillow beside her. Meet me at the Pont des Arts at sunset. Wear something beautiful. Not that you need help with that. Claire blinked, rereading the words, her stomach twisting in anticipation. Pont des Arts, the bridge of artists and lovers. She had written about it before. Photographed it. Stood on it 100 times. But something about this felt different. Something about tonight felt like a beginning. Sunset. Over the Seine. When Claire arrived, the sky was on fire. Golden light melted into rich shades of pink and lavender, casting soft reflections across the rippling water of the Seine. The city glowed, the hum of street musicians and distant laughter wrapping around her like music. And at the center of the bridge, standing among the thousands of lovelocks left behind by strangers, was Julien, dressed in a crisp black suit, his hair slightly tousled from the breeze, his hands tucked into his pockets. But it was his expression that nearly stole the breath from her lungs, because he was looking at her like she was the only thing in the world, like he had been waiting for her his entire life. Claire swallowed hard and stepped forward. "Okay, Laurent." "What's all this?" Julien smirked, but there was something soft, something reverent in his gaze, just a little surprise. Then, before she could respond, he lifted a hand, and suddenly music filled the air. Claire gasped, turning just in time to see a live quartet step forward, instruments in hand, beginning to play a familiar melody. It was the song they had danced to 5 years ago in a tiny, candlelit jazz bar in Paris, the night she had fallen in love with him. Her heart stumbled. Julien reached for her hand, pulling her in close. "Dance with me," he murmured. Claire exhaled a laugh, shaking her head. "You are such a damn romantic." Julien grinned, but his voice was softer when he said, "Only for you." And then he kissed her, slow, lingering, a promise in itself. They danced, swaying beneath the Parisian sky, her body pressed against his, her heart hammering in her chest. And when the song ended, Julien stepped back, his fingers tightened around hers. And then, right there, in the heart of the city that had always been theirs, he dropped to one knee. Claire's entire world stilled. Julien's voice was steady, but his eyes held everything. "I should have done this years ago," he admitted, "because I've known since the moment I met you that you were the only person I'd ever want to love. Your chaos and passion and adventure and home all at once. And I don't want to spend another second of my life wondering what if." Claire's throat tightened, her eyes already burning with tears. Julien pulled a small black box from his pocket, flipping it open to reveal a ring so breathtaking, so impossibly perfect, that she forgot how to breathe. A gold band, delicate and simple, but in the center, a single brilliant-cut diamond framed by 2 tiny sapphires, the colors of the Seine at night, the colors of Paris, the colors of them. Julien swallowed hard, his voice rough. "Claire Dupont, will you marry me?" Claire let out a choked, breathless laugh, already nodding before she could find the words. "Yes," she whispered. then louder through the tears and laughter and absolute disbelief. Yes! Julien barely had time to slide the ring onto her finger before Claire launched herself at him, wrapping her arms around his neck, crashing her lips onto his. The bridge erupted in applause, but neither of them heard it, because this was it. This was forever. And for the first time in her life, Claire wasn't afraid of it. What is the most romantic place you can imagine being proposed to? Don't just watch. Be part of the story. Subscribe now. Chapter 20. A Life in Full Color. Epilogue. 1 year later. Paris had always been beautiful, but now it was home. Claire stood on the balcony of their apartment, overlooking the Seine as the morning sun bathed the city in soft gold. Below, the world was waking up. Vendors setting up their stalls, the aroma of fresh bread curling through the air, the quiet hum of laughter and conversation. And inside, her life was everything she had ever dreamed of. She turned back, stepping. Through the open doors into their home, an airy loft filled with art, books, and remnants of a life built together. Paintings lined the walls, a mix of Julien's work and pieces they had collected from around the world. A half-drunk cup of coffee sat on the counter, next to an open sketchbook filled with unfinished drawings, and standing in the kitchen, grumbling over an espresso machine that refused to cooperate, was Julien. Claire smirked. "You do realize the machine isn't going to fix itself if you glare at it." Julien shot her a look, his hair an absolute mess, his shirt half-buttoned as if he had given up midway. "I'm an artist, Claire, not a barista," she laughed, stepping toward him. "Good thing you're pretty, then." Julien arched a brow, abandoning the machine entirely as he grabbed her waist, pulling her flush against him. "Pretty?" he mused, tilting his head. "That's all I get." Claire bit her lip, pretending to think. "Well, I guess you're also extremely talented," Julien hummed. "And?" She ran her fingers up his chest, tracing the faint paint smudge on his collarbone. "And annoyingly charming." Getting closer, she leaned in, her lips brushing against his, "and completely, ridiculously, maddeningly in love with me." Julien grinned against her mouth, hopelessly. Then he kissed her deep and slow, as if they weren't already running late for their gallery opening, as if the world outside didn't exist. And honestly, Claire didn't care. Vie en couleur. A business, a passion, a dream, come true. What had started as a simple idea had turned into something bigger than they had ever imagined. Their business, Vie en couleur, had exploded in the last year, a fusion of art and travel that brought people from all over the world to experience Paris through the eyes of an artist. Claire handled the travel experiences, curating private walking tours, hidden gems, and art-inspired adventures. Julien led intimate workshops in his gallery, showing visitors how to capture the essence of the city through paint, just like he had once taught Claire. And together, they had created something truly remarkable. Tonight was their biggest event yet, an exhibition featuring rising artists, a celebration of Paris, of love, of life in full color. As they walked into the gallery later that evening, hand in hand, surrounded by art and music and laughter, Claire felt something settle deep inside her. She had spent so many years chasing a life she thought she wanted. But this was everything, and then, Julien whispered in her ear, "We should probably tell them soon." Claire blinked up at him. "Tell them what?" Julien smirked, pressing a slow kiss against her temple, his hand slipping over her stomach. Claire's breath caught, the same warmth, the same flutter she had been feeling for weeks. It was real. They were going to have a baby. She let out a shaky laugh. "You think they'll be happy?" Julien's smile softened, his gaze filled with nothing but love. "Claire," he murmured, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear, "they'll be thrilled. Because I am." Claire swallowed past the lump in her throat, blinking against the happy tears burning in her eyes. This was it. This was their forever. Paris, their love, their business, their family, and as she kissed her husband, surrounded by everything they had built together, she knew she had finally found her home. The end. If you could picture your own version of a happily ever after, What would it look like? The story is not oversubscribed for part 2 with an unexpected twist. This book will be raw, emotional, dark, and filled with tension. Instead of walking away, Claire fights back, but not just to hurt Julien, to make him feel exactly what she felt. Instead of heartbreak breaking her, she becomes something stronger, something sharper, and in the end, Julien will regret everything. Subscribe and hit the bell notification so you don't miss this epic story.